Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I am a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, and this is Pints with Aquinas. Two small announcements at the top of the hour. First, this isn't going to be an hour, by the way, so don't worry. First, I wrote a book. It's about prudence. It's called Prudence, Choose Confidently, Live Boldly. It's available for pre-order in paperback on Amazon.com. It's also available for order on Kindle, so you can check it out, and I hope that you profit from it. Second thing, I contribute to a podcast called Godsplaining with four of the Dominican friars, and we're having retreats this summer in New York and in North Carolina. And the details for those weekend retreats are available at godsplaining.org, so I encourage you to check it out and to apply. Hope to see you there. All right, for this episode, we're going to talk about sins of speech. Why? Because it's great to talk about sin all the time? No, because talking about sin provides a healthy kind of admonition, I suppose, but also it gives us a sense of the goods that are at stake so that we can form the virtues which help us to, kind of enshrine those goods in our heart, esteem those goods as we ought to. So I think about that in a particular way with respect to sins of speech. So let's turn our gaze in that direction. Okay, so sins of speech. Just to say simply, we're not going to cover all sins of speech because that would be an enormous task. So St. Augustine describes sin as any thought, word, or deed contrary to the eternal law. And there are many ways in which one can sin by word contrary to the eternal law. So in other episodes, we talked about lying, for instance, which is, saying something that doesn't reflect your mind or doesn't correspond to reality. We're not going to talk about lying. Other examples of sins of speech, swear words. It's an open question as to saying swear words like crass, gross words is in fact sinful, and if so, the degree to which it's sinful. We're not going to touch on that. Maybe we'll address that in another video. We're not also going to address. It's like tambien and tampoco. Neither are we going to address the question of taking the name of the Lord in vain, which is treated under the category of, a commandment. Here, we're going to talk about a particular set of sins of speech, which kind of crowd around the subject of gossip. So why? Well, when St. Thomas talks about sins of speech, like when he devotes a kind of little treatise to it, he does it in the context of the treatise on justice. So he's considering, what do we owe other people? And he starts by considering what we owe other people in terms of their life and livelihood, what we owe other people in terms of their possessions. And then from there, he passes on to a consideration of their excellence, their honor, their reputation, their good name, etc. And it's under that rubric that he considers sins of speech. So I thought it'd be a good way to sensitize ourselves to the goods of the excellence, the honor, the good name, the esteem, the reputation of the other. So we're going to treat 4 sins of speech. St. Thomas has 5 in his list, but I'm going to take cursing off our list because he means it like malediction, and that involves its own kind of theology of blessing. So maybe we will also do that in a future video. I just keep promising future videos, but I feel like I've delivered on many that I've promised on, but I've also lost track of some of the ones that I've promised on. So if I've forgotten and you are looking forward, feel free to drop in a comment and say hey, do one on this one. Okay. So 4 sins of speech that we're going to talk about. I'm going to give first kind of oldie-timey names of them, and then as we go through them, then we will address more kind of newy-timey names. So the names that are given in the most popular English translation of the Summa Theologiae are as follows: reviling, backbiting, tale-bearing, and then derision or mockery. All right. So the first one, which I just called reviling, it's sometimes also called contumely, but that's a kind of 19th century-ish word for it. What we would probably say most often is insolence. And what you're doing here is you're confronting somebody in a disrespectful way, and you are sinning by speech against his or her honor. Now, that person might be alone. You might just be upbraiding him or her in a kind of private setting, or it may be in the company of other individuals, which would heighten the stakes of that kind of exchange. But basically, it's a sin against the honor of another human being. So what is honor? Honor is that which kind of redounds to excellence. So somebody has something excellent, somebody does something honorable, and as a result of which they have honor ascribed. So the pertinent virtue there is magnanimity. So to want to do honorable things that are worthy of honor because they're great, right? So in this case, you're actually undermining, or you're trying to pit yourself against another's pursuit or retaining of honor. So what you're effectively doing, the sinful kind of heart of the matter, is that you are depriving that other individual of respect, all right? And St. Thomas has a description where he's just talked about robbery and theft. Robbery is when you take something from somebody in plain sight by violence, and theft is when you take something from somebody not in plain sight by secrecy, right? By kind of like, I don't know what that sound effect actually communicated, but you see where I'm going. So reviling is like a kind of robbery of another's honor. You pit yourself against the other, you rob him of the respect that he is due as a way by which to kind of dress him down, maybe in front of others or just maybe in your own sight. So I think that while we might be tempted just to kind of get things off our chest, here I think a helpful recognition to make is that there is never a setting in which I can just give vent to my emotions, even in the name of whatever, like psychological well-balance, or in the name of honesty, sincerity, genuineness, or whatever it is. There's no point at which I can just say the whole tide of angry things that I should say without making a judgment as to the wound it might inflict on another person's honor or how it might rob him of respect. So I need to introduce that judgment at every level, okay? So I can't just say the things and then expect to pick up the pieces later, because a real injury can be done, all right? So that's the first. Second is detraction. I introduced this when I did my first summary as backbiting, because that's what the most popular English translation of the Summa calls it. But we would know this more commonly as detraction. So the Latin word for it is just detractio, okay? So in this case, what you're doing is you're undermining another person's name, all right? And you're going about it in hidden or even sneaky fashion. So we said that reviling is like robbery. It's like a kind of violent seizure of another's possession. Detraction is like theft. So it's a kind of hidden or secret seizure of another's possession. And whereas reviling considers the other person honor, detraction considers the other person's good name. So St. Thomas will say, all right, on account of the fact that you're doing it in secret or you're doing it in hidden, like kind of hidden ways, that probably signifies either that you're afraid of the other person, you might even esteem the other person a little bit more. If you've gotten to the point of reviling, you are really just cutting loose. But detraction is kind of more the common fare, whereby you sin against another in speech. And St. Thomas will say, we call it detraction. We take it from the Latin verb detrahere, which means to take away from, because you're taking away from the other his good name on account of the fact that you might be ascribing something false, you might be exaggerating some negative aspect while true doesn't merit this kind of description. You might be saying what? You might be like attributing to the other some bad intention, okay? You also might be diminishing or gainsaying or otherwise like calling into question that person's goodness. You can do it in a variety of ways, but you're taking away from that person something that he is due or something that is in fact his. And St. Thomas will often liken honor or a good name to a kind of possession, and he says it's the most prized of possessions, right? So he distinguishes among the different ways in which we understand that, but basically of the things that we possess, right, honor is among the greatest because it testifies to an excellence, and a good name is among the greatest because it opens doors which, if closed to us, make life really, really difficult. Or, in the case of what would be like a further thing, like, we'll get to that later. I'll leave that off. But here, in the case of detraction, you're taking something away from another person which is very, very precious, because without a good name, you're toast, right? You like think about like a teacher in a school who is falsely accused by another teacher of sexual misconduct. That person's life is over as a teacher. Even if, the person's name is cleared, it still becomes exceedingly difficult to come back when your potential pupil's parents Google your name and come to discover, yikes, pulling my kid out of this class, complain to the teacher, or complain to the principal. And even if the principal tries to vindicate, it just becomes too much of an administrative nightmare. So it's just like, cut them loose, all right? So your good name is super, super important. And St. Thomas also brings up the fact that if we rob someone, if we thieve someone of their good name, then we're actually bound to make restitution. And I'm thinking here of the movie Doubt, which I don't know if you've seen it, Dustin Hoffman. Nope, not him. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Wrong Hoffman. My bad. And then who is the other one? Meryl Streep? No, I don't remember. But he likens this sin to taking a pillow stuffed with feathers to the top of a high building, and then cutting the pillow open, and then spreading the feathers throughout the town, and then trying to make up for what you've done. Is like trying to go and collect all of those feathers, because people have already made off with them, and people have already begun to, communicate them to other human beings as well. So it should give us a kind of fear and trepidation to be engaged in this type of sin of speech, to work against another's good name in secret ways, to attribute to him or her something that's not true, or to take away something that is, on account of the fact that we want to diminish them, we want to rob them of something that is theirs. And here it becomes all the more terrible when we recognize this sin under the name that we refer to it most often by, which is gossip, which is terrible, right? So then it's for us to determine the settings in which we talk about other people and how, because sometimes it's necessary to troubleshoot a problem or to give expression to a frustration with a trusted companion or friend in a way that begets healthy exchanges and fruitful thinking about how best to go forward. But we also can't just perpetually indulge in bad talk about other people, even if it might to us seem merited, because we have a tendency to exaggerate, right? We have a tendency to diminish the good. We have a tendency to kind of inflate the bad. And then we can do real harm to another's reputation, which is a perilous prospect. So, yes, St. Thomas will say, for instance, this is worse than theft, because a good name is to be prized above all other possessions. So yeah, it's for us then to resist this temptation, to resist this tendency, not with a kind of puritanical stolidness, but with a kind of fear, with a kind of trepidation, lest we should deprive someone else of that which is justly theirs. And then the last two, which we can gloss real quickly, are, so in the way it's translated, in the Summa, the English version of the Summa, it's tale-bearing. But the Latin is susurratio, susurrations, and it's almost onomatopoeic, okay, because it's like a kind of whispering that one might do. But this particular sin concerns, so sowing of discord among friends. It's a kind of sin of speech whereby you work against another's friendships, and you try to sow seeds of doubt or sow seeds of distrust, such that those friendships break up on the rocks of, whatever to be, distrust or lack of confidence. And here, again, when we're liking the goods which are imperiled by these sins of speech to, like other comparable goods, St. Thomas will say that the good of friends is, to be esteemed above all others. As Aristotle asks, without friends, who could live? So this is an especially insidious sin of speech when we try to break down another person's human connections, human contacts, to isolate him or her. And you've probably had the experience where, like one of your close friends kind of turns a cold shoulder to you, or seems to, in whatever communication, and it causes you all kinds of anxiety, because it's like, why has this person changed their aspect towards me? Is it because of something someone else said, and how do I have any control of that, or how do I vindicate it without looking wildly, insecure or otherwise maladjusted? So it can cause all kinds of harm if we're not sensitive to the human connections of others and seek in our speech to be just as regarding them. And then the fourth and final one is derision, right? Which is kind of like scorn or mockery. And the idea here is that you say things to expose another person to shame. So that's the specific thing that it concerns, to expose another person to shame. Now, mind you, and St. Thomas says as much, we can use humor, we can use jokes as a way by which to amuse or delight. And mockery, like kind of light mockery, may be part of that, often directed against oneself by self-denigration or self-deprecation. But, it can be directed towards another human being with whom you have a certain bond, with whom you have a certain trust, who recognizes in whatever it is that you say that you don't mean ill by it, but it's meant to lighten the mood, it's meant to draw others in. But yeah, when we do it in such a way that we show to the other that we don't take them seriously, that they're not worth taking seriously, then we can expose them to real shame. And that is, pretty disastrous, or at least it can be pretty disastrous. But rather, we should show the other a kind of grace or dignity in proportion to what is their due, a kind of reverence, in fact, according to what is their due. So, that means that we adapt our speech to time, place, setting, circumstance, and individual, right? It doesn't mean that we talk baby talk, to small humans, and that we talk like grave, strange vocalic register talk to large humans. But it does mean that we should show another person the type of respect that he or she is due given, who they are, how they've lived, and where they've come to be. So, just kind of making a small summary then of these sins of speech. We recognize the fact that justice isn't just a matter of exchange of goods, because there are certain possessions of man and woman that go beyond the mere kind of material things with which we are compassed about, right? There are other good things on offer, like honor, like a good name, like friendships, and like a kind of sense of dignity or reverence. And we can be responsible for undermining that as it's possessed by another human being. We can be responsible for visiting a kind of violence against that. And that's not something that we want to be implicated in. Now, mind you, are we going to be tempted in this direction? Many will continue to be until the day, they draw their last breath. But we ask God for the grace to continue to heal and to elevate our sensibilities, and also to sensitize our consciences so that we realize when it is afoot, so that we can ask God continually for the graces that we need to, turn away from the temptation insofar as it could sully our soul and remove or take away from others what is their due. And rather grow in the grace of a mutual love and justice, so that we render to another what is their due, and give them, in fact, the things which lead to their flourishing in accord with our state and theirs. So boom, that is it. This is Pints with Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel and then push the bell, and that way you'll get email updates on all kinds of sweet things which transpire within. And then if you haven't yet, please do check out Godsplaining, which I mentioned at the top of the hour. It's a podcast that I contribute to with 4 other Dominican friars, and I mentioned that we have retreats coming up, and you can find all the details about that on godsplaining.org. So, that's all from me. My prayers are for you. Please pray for me, and I will catch you next time on Pints with Aquinas.